If it had been a couple of years ago and you'd had me on here, I would have told you that the statistic is 57 people every single day in Australia are diagnosed with breast cancer. But I'm here to tell you now, the statistic at the McGrath Foundation that we now lead to is 1 in 2 people will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. So we might have 367, but with those statistics, we need more support than ever to bring that care that every single family deserves, having that person who's there by your side, who's acting, out the multidisciplinary team. She sat there with your name in her mouth. She's shaping the care to your needs, not to our needs. And that's why you will always hear the McGrath Foundation very grateful for the support, but always talking about the support we need, because unfortunately, 1 in 2 means we need more nurses.
Welcome to the Profitable Farmer podcast, where we share stories and tips to help you run a better farming business and create your very own freedom farm. If you're looking to work smarter and not harder in your farm business, welcome. You're in the right place. G'day, I hope this finds you well. This is an interview I've been looking forward to for some time. The McGrath Foundation is, without doubt, one of Australia's greatest ever iconic modern-day charities. The Pink Test and so many other pink-coloured events across our schools and sporting clubs and communities in Australia, I think, are just testament to the humanity and the goodwill of Australians behind a charity that does so much to support breast cancer patients and now all cancer patients across Australia. Tracy Bevan is the ambassador, or one of the ambassadors and directors to the McGrath Foundation. It gives me great pleasure to interview Tracy today. To introduce her, Tracy is one of our most quietly formidable figures in the not-for-profit world. She says that she's more Jane McGrath's best mate than director and ambassador to the McGrath Foundation. I think that's true. In her mid-50s now, born and raised in Manchester, England, currently living in Sydney. She has 2 daughters, Olivia and Amelia. Moved to Australia to marry and support Michael Bevan, a great Australian cricketer, and was a cricket wife with Jane for some time. They separated in 2014, and Tracy describes it as an amicable split. Since then, she's gone on to underpin and lead the McGrath Foundation charity, following a 20-year-old promise to Jane to see this cause through. It's a truly incredible story. And over that time, she has twice been nominated for Australian of the Year, 2012 and 2017, and has been an Australia Day ambassador since 2014 and won the Judges' Choice Collaborator Award at the 2018 Pro Bono Impact Awards. Tracy, thank you for being so open with us and for sharing your story, Jane's story, and the McGrath Foundation story. Tracy, I've been looking forward to this conversation for some time. I'm so excited to share the McGrath Foundation and your story. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, to kick us off, and as her best friend, where do you feel we would be without Jane McGrath?
Well, we definitely want to have 367 cancer care nurses helping over 174,000 Australian families going through a diagnosis of cancer. And that's pure and simple facts. Yeah, the world is a much better place because of Jane McGrath.
How do you describe Jane, Tracy?
Funny, kind, considerate, very creative. We'd swap Christmas gifts or birthday gifts, and her gift at Christmas in particular would always be something that looked fantastic. And then there'd be like a bauble on the outside that you could then put on the tree that you could keep forever. Whereas mine was just, wrapped. She did lots of craft, cross stitch. And when my daughters were made, she made them both a beautiful cross stitch and framed it. And I've still got those. So yeah, but she was a fantastic mother and a beautiful friend.
I think you met at an airport cafe way back when. Was that when you were first making your way to Australia, or
No.
how did that play out?
Well, I met and married cricketer Michael Bevan. I met him in 93, moved to Australia in 94. But it wasn't until 96 that Glenn told me he had a new girlfriend and she was from England as well. And I had to tell him that I was still friends with his ex and that I didn't really need a new friend. But then we went to the airport and the boys were going on tour and I saw Jane. And when all the boys left, she came over and I said, "Do you fancy a cup of tea?" And she said, "I thought you'd never ask." And then we continued to talk at the airport in the cafe. And I think we probably spent half of the fees that the place got paid in parking. That day was just incredible. And, we were friends forever after that day.
It's amazing what can come from the strength in a friendship, Tracy. How did that friendship evolve over that duration of you both being married to Australian cricketers? No doubt while they were touring, there was plenty of time where they were away from you and you them. And I think, your friendship with Jane obviously was forged in those moments. What is it like to be married to an elite sports person?
Well, we both gave up careers and families and friends, obviously, to be with Michael and Glenn, which was really easy to do because that's how I knew that, he was my one, because it was very easy to get on that plane. And I cried all the way because it was so easy to leave my loved ones. But then when I came to Australia and Michael had got picked to play cricket for Australia, I don't think I really understood what that meant and how long he would be away. And we were in the era of where girls didn't really go on tour. The Alan Borders era was a lot tougher, but the Mark Taylor, Steve Waugh era softened and girls were allowed to start coming on tour. But we're still in the years where girls had to make their own way, pay their own way, and you couldn't go with the boys on the bus. You had to make your own way to the ground. The boys would finish the game and go back on the bus. You then had to go back and find your own way back to the hotel and with the children, but make your own way back. But even Alan Borders era, they couldn't even stay at the same hotel. So we'd come a long way. So I don't think I really understood the impact of being with the cricket, but I never, ever complained. Because one of the things that Michael said to me was that when he met me, he knew within weeks that he wanted to marry me, but he knew that it was for me to make sure that I could live in Australia because, as he said to me, there's no chance that he could live in England because he wanted to play cricket for Australia more than anything all his life. So I think, and I know talking with Jane, she felt exactly the same, easy to move, didn't quite understand the loneliness of being with an elite sportsman. And that's why when we came together, both being English, both being around the same age, she's 3 months older than me. I like to remind her about that. And came together all the time because we were living exactly the same life. And it was a lonely life, but we had each other. So we forged this amazing friendship like sisters. She'd say I was a sister that she never had. I'd like to say the younger sister she never had. Yeah, we were together because of circumstance, but we had basically the same, we're living the same life and we had the same personality. And yeah, life was a lot easier having Jane in my...
What was it to pack up and leave your community, your friends, your family, your life, and relocate and make that sort of a commitment in reflection, Tracy?
Well, as my mother said, as she was pushing me on the plane, Manchester or Manly? You choose. My mum actually said to me, because very close, incredibly close to my family, my sister, my mother, and my cousin, who is like my sister too, and her daughter, who sadly passed away from leukemia at age 18. So I was very close to them. But as I said, because I love Michael I cried because I knew I was doing the right thing. But sat on that plane going to Australia, I just felt really sad. Really sad, but when I landed, and honestly, I am English, but there's no place like Australia. There's no place like Australia, so it was very easy to establish myself in Australia because I wanted it, and it was so beautiful. It was just so different from what I was used to. I couldn't believe that Australians just don't understand how beautiful, well, some Australians don't understand how beautiful this country is because traveling a lot and living in the UK, I was just in awe. When I got on the Manly ferry, Michael said 3 things to me when I arrived. Go to Manly ferry, get on the ferry to Circular Quay, get off and catch a taxi to the SCG. And I didn't know what any of that meant, but I kept saying those words. Ferry to the Circular Quay, taxi to the SCG. And I got on the day after I arrived, January 1994, and I got on the ferry, and as we went round the heads, the North Heads, and I saw, it still takes my breath away, Opera House and the bridge. I just sat there, tears falling down because of this sight that I was seeing that I'd only ever seen on TV. And I just couldn't believe that I now was allowed to stay here. And yeah, but it did weigh heavy on me. But my mum kept saying constantly, Tracy, you can always go home, but just try and stay and see how you feel. Yeah, it was difficult. I'm not making light of it. It was really difficult leaving everybody. But I mean, if I tell you now that my mum and sister live here, it's got a lot easier.
How old were you, Tracy?
I was 27. I was 27 years old and, just couldn't believe it.
So we have lots of, and I'm going to stereotype here, but farming wives arrive into small country towns and to remote and rural farming communities. And that is a stereotype because often it's absolutely the other way around. And isolation is real for them, especially away from their families and the communities that they've grown up in. Do you have any tips on how to navigate that?
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier for a cricket wife. That, I'm not taking away from a farmer's wife. It's not the pressures of being a cricket wife. I'm just going to say that. But as an individual, moving to another country, no friendships established, not a job. I couldn't get a job. For me, it was all about making my time for finding out what I liked, finding friends outside of Michael, establishing myself. Like for me, it was going to the gym, just and obviously Jane in the future. But as I said earlier, I was friends with Glenn's partner who lived in Manly, where I lived on the Northern Beaches, and just her inviting me to meet her friends. So for me, it was establishing friendships, making sure I got out, doing things what I liked doing, time away from Michael and his world. I actually tell my daughters the same thing. Love is beautiful, but you still need to be who you are and find who you are, and that can change over time. But I think it's really important that you find what it is you like in life and try and make friends and, establish yourself outside of the family.
Thanks, Tracy. So before we talk about the McGrath Foundation and that incredible story, Tracy, tell us a bit about growing up in England.
So I was born in Manchester, that beautiful place, Manchester in the UK, which is incredible, an amazing city. It's the second largest in the UK. And I was the funny kid at school. I enjoyed school because I enjoyed friendships. I'm still very much friends with the kids that I grew up with. One of them, as I'm about to say, is called Cheryl. And we're still very much friends thanks to social media. So we did have domestic violence in my house. And so I think not that, my dad was a good dad. He was just a very bad husband. And the way that I got to forgive my father was that as I got older, I tried to look into his childhood. And it's not excusing. I want to say now, this is not excusing domestic violence or what my dad did. That is not what I'm saying. But I had to find a way to work things in my mind so I didn't have that black cloud I was living under as a child. And when I looked into and asked family questions and I looked into my dad's childhood, sort of answered quite a few things about my dad. And I wrote him 9-page double-sided A4 letter telling him how much I hated being his daughter, how much I was embarrassed at carrying his name. And I just poured everything into that letter because growing up, I had been too scared to tell my father any of this. I was being cathartic for myself, and I knew I needed to do this to be able to forgive him, to then have him back in my life. And I wrote this letter, and I remember my hand like this, posting it, because I just knew what was coming once he got that letter. And by the way, at this point, we had left home at 14, left Manchester, and we went into hiding in a place called Weston-super-Mare, which is in Somerset near Bristol. So I then wrote the letter to my dad as I got older because I needed to do it, and I needed to be able to, like I said, move on with my life. And my dad rang me, and he reacted exactly the way I thought he would because it was all ego-driven. And then I just basically left him. And then he rang me again a while later and had a breakdown and said, I need to meet you. And I met my dad, and it was the first time in my life that I saw my dad as my dad. And he had a breakdown and told me lots of things in his own words. He didn't make any excuse. He said, please, forgive me. And him and my mum are now good friends because I forced my dad, I held a mirror at my dad and forced him to look at who he was and what he was doing. Not that he didn't know that, but no one had ever dared to hold a mirror up to my dad. And I did that, but I did it for me, not for him. But it was also great for my dad. And my dad, and my dad's 83 years old, and he still tells me how much he loves my mum. He tells my mum and how he's a broken man because every day he has to wake up knowing that his daughters are all in Australia, his grandchildren are all in Australia, and he lives a life of regret because of what he did to my mum, and obviously the impact that had as a child for me. But I always say to my dad, forgive yourself because we forgive you. And I've always said to my dad the fact that I don't have to punish you, Dad. You punish yourself every single day. That's it's not okay because everybody forgives you. So that was my childhood. But I mean, it sounds like it was, very dark place. It wasn't. Because I think that's why I was the class clown. I wanted people because it was I had a lovely house, a lovely clean house, and always the best dressed. And, externally, everything looked fine. So I think I played a role of everything's great, singy, dancy, Tracy, to hide what really was going on at home. So, so it was tough. But you know what? And I know it's a cliche, but it made me who I am today.
It must have taken real courage to write and post that letter, Tracy. And how do you reflect that adversity, and I'm sorry that you experienced that, how has that shaped you?
Well, I always remember, as far back as I can remember, always saying, I will never have that in my life. I will never put up with that in my life. I am a good person. So I know I've always done a lot of self-talk. And I think having my father as, someone who is someone to look at and go, I won't have that. I won't have someone talking to me like that. I won't let somebody do that. I think it set my values and standards in life. So I grew up very aware of, because my senses are very heightened, because I was always on the lookout or I'd listen to how he opened the gate because I knew what mood he would be in. So I think I'm empathetic as well because I can feel somebody's emotions. I can feel if someone's struggling. I can feel if someone's angry. I think my childhood gave me a lot of, it's made me who I am today. And look, I've done all right in my own life. Even I'm not married to Michael Bevan anymore, but we're still really good friends. We're still in business together. I've met all his girlfriends. I've liked all his girlfriends. I've liked his girlfriends more than him some days. So I think my childhood, you can either let it dictate your future, where it's always living under the cloud of, yes, because I lived this childhood, this is, these are the decisions I made in life because this, and I just used it in the opposite way where I'd be like, no, for the rest of my life, I don't care if I'm on my own. I will never, I'm a good person. I'm a good catch. I've always led that way. And I think that's what led me to Michael Bevan and the life that I've had because of I use my childhood as a positive thing. to lead my future.
Amazing, Tracy. I think you were with Jane when she found her lump in her breast that perhaps was part of the start of the McGrath Foundation journey. Would you mind speaking to that and, I guess, her early journey with breast cancer?
Sure. So I married Michael on the 19th of April, 1997. Jane was at my wedding. I always laugh because so was Glenn's ex, but we're all friends. And straight after, we were on an Ashes tour of the UK, had the honeymoon, then we went to the UK. Now, this was the time when the wives were not allowed on tour for the first month, but because Jane and I were English, Cricket Australia couldn't stop us. So we went back to the UK, and we even spent time when we landed. Jane came to my house, I went to her house. Before we even met the boys, we would just spend time together. And then we were allowed to join the team, and we were having the absolute time of our lives, because being a cricket partner, it is incredible, the things that you get to see and do, and the amazing people that you get to meet. And like I said, from my past, living this life was just, this is incredible. And I was never taking any of it for granted. No way. So we were having our best time. And then we got to Canterbury, and it was a Saturday afternoon in the UK in about 4:00. And we were going on a team dinner. Now, this was very unusual because we weren't usually allowed to go on team dinners because they were bonding time, which Jane and I used to laugh at, because we'd be like, one of the most successful cricket teams, and they still needed time to bond, which was hilarious. But we were going on this dinner. So I got a knock at my door, and I opened the door, and there was Jane with just a towel wrapped around her. Now, this wasn't unusual, Jeremy, because Jane was quite anxious, and knowing that we were going on this team dinner, I thought she was there to say, Trace, what are you wearing? Are you dressing up? Are you dressing down? Are you wearing jeans? Because that's what she would normally do. And so when I opened the door, I said, oh, come in. You okay? And she said, Glenn's asked me to get your opinion on something. And I thought, well, that's a bit weird. And she stood there and she's going, it's only Trace, it's only Trace. And I said, are you okay? And what she did the next moment changed everything. And she dropped her towel and she stood there and she looked me in the eye and she said, Trace, does my boob look a funny shape to you? And I looked at her and I thought again, she was being insecure. And I basically went to the line, Jane, they are magnificent. And she didn't laugh, and she was crying. And I said, are you okay? You're scaring me. And she took a deep breath and she took my hand and she placed it on her breast. And instantly it was like slow motion, because I felt this, what I personally always describe as a frozen pea lump. And I remember looking at her beautiful pale blue eyes, tears running down, because I knew that I could feel this lump. And we both just looked at each other and held each other so tightly, which felt like, an eternity, but it was just for a minute. And she pulled away and she said, will you feel it too? And I said, oh, darling. She just said, it's okay. I'm going to go to the doctors. And to cut a very long story short, at 31 years old, my best friend was diagnosed with breast cancer. But I always like to reflect in that hotel room in 1997, when we weren't talking about breast cancer, especially in younger women, when we weren't talking pink and we weren't talking about, breast awareness like we do today. And I think about my friend. How did she know her breast had changed shape? Well, as she told me, her mother had had a diagnosis of breast cancer a few years earlier. Her mother survived breast cancer. Her mother's still alive today. But for Jane, that was an alarm bell. Not that it was, she, carried the BRCA gene or anything like that. But in Jane, it made her breast aware, as she said. So for her, she got to know what her breast shape is, because we're all different. And she said once she got to know her breast, then she started just checking her breast every month. So she was doing that in 1997. So when she was in the shower and she said she was washing her hair like this and she had her arms raised and she was looking into a mirror and she thought, that does not look normal, because she knew what her normal looked like. And that's what we say at the McGrath Foundation. If you grow them, know them. Get to know your breast, keep checking your breast like my friend was doing. And as soon as she saw the difference, she went to Glenn, and then Glenn sent her to me. And then at 31 years old, she was diagnosed with breast cancer.
She managed to get through that first round of treatment successfully, Tracy. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, for Jane, I was in the UK when all this happened. She went back to Australia. She got diagnosed. And in fact, I'll tell you, she wanted to stay in England once she found this lump. And Glenn said, because she said, we're not married, we're not engaged, this is not your issue. And Glenn said, you are not. You're coming back with me and we're going to do this together. So that's why she went back to Australia. I just found out I was pregnant a few weeks before. So I stayed in England after the tour to be with my family and tell everyone I was pregnant. And for Jane, when she rang to say it's breast cancer, now she also made the decision when I said, I'm coming back. And she said, no, you're not, because I don't want this to change our friendship. It's not going to change Glenn and his career, because if things start to change, then breast cancer has taken over my whole world. And I can't have that, Trace. I just can't. I need to be in control of some parts of my life. So for Jane, she would never allow myself or Glenn or brother Jonathan, who lives in Australia, or her mother to be there when she went for treatment. So when she went for treatment, she just got on with it. And she did that right up until she was in remission.
So then what's the link between that moment and the McGrath Foundation idea coming to be?
The link then was that she was in remission and she got asked by Random House to write a book. And the book she called A Love for Life. And it's a story I wrote in remission. And it's a story of being diagnosed. It's about meeting Glenn. It's being diagnosed, going through the diagnosis. She would write a chapter. Glenn would write a chapter. And it's a beautiful book. I wrote the foreword. There's a beautiful picture in the front of the book of her and I on her wedding day. We're sat on this beautiful couch. Me as a maid of honor, her in a wedding dress, and nobody knew, but she's holding the lipstick because she'd just been reapplying a lipstick because she'd been in the bathroom being sick, because nobody knew at the time but me, Glenn, and her family that she was also pregnant, which was beautiful. So this is a magnificent time that she'd wrote this book. Random House said to her they wanted to make a donation to a charity, a breast cancer charity, for her to nominate. So when she heard that, this was the time she hand wrote that book, Jeremy. It was not laptop. She hand wrote that book. And she said, you know what, Trace? I'm going to do some research. I'm going to find out where there's a gap within the charity. She said, because I'm thinking about starting a charity. She said, and I want to give back to this incredible country that we are privileged to call home. And she said, so I'm going to set up a charity. We're going to find a gap. She said, because as Cricket Wives, we may as well fundraise and donate it to the National Breast Cancer Foundation, who do a wonderful job of research. We may as well do that. She said, but no, this is my money from my book, and I'm going to find a gap in services, and I'm going to do that. And she said, will you do it with me? And I said, sign me up for that. Now, at the time, I actually thought, we thought selfishly, this is our selfish part of the charity. We didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know Jane was doing all the due diligence of where there's a gap. But selfishly, for us, why was we ready to do a charity? It was because now as Cricket Wives, now married, now with children, being with a husband who comes and goes, so they dictate, when they're around and when they're not around, the cricket does. We plan our lives around that. Then we've got children who come first over everything. And Jane said to me, if we do this, Trace, whenever we're out raising funds in whatever capacity, we do not have to think about the kids. We do not have to think about the boys. We do not have to clock watch. We do not have to be feeling guilty. We can come together for the better good of others. She said, so what a great way of spending time together. And that's when I said, sign me up for that. So there was a double-edged sword for doing the charity. It was spending time together as girls, our friendship. That was equally as important to us as our lives with Michael and Glenn and the kids. So that's why she set the foundation up, wanting to give back. But what gave us the mission was, unfortunately, in 2003, she was re-diagnosed. So the breast cancer, as we say, metastasized, that left side of diagnosis, and now it was in her bones. And that was traumatic for Jane, because she'd wrote this book and she'd say to me, Trace, even when I go out, the amount of people that come up to me who bought the book and say they're either going through a diagnosis, been through a diagnosis, know someone who's going through a diagnosis, and the hope that this book, A Love for Life, gave to them. And she then got re-diagnosed, and she cried and she cried and she said, I feel so bad. I've let so many people down. And I said, what are you talking about? No, you can't think like that. I said, we just need to focus on how you're going to get through this. But she also knew when it was in her bones that one day, you can't get rid of breast cancer when it's in your bones. But she likened it to having something that she could manage, that you could prolong her life with treatment and drugs. And she was right. And many people live a very long, prolonged life now, especially now, how far we've come with treatment and drugs. So for Jane, she had to start treatment again. Glenn had to go on tour. He was on tour. I had to wait for my phone call. My phone call came. I knew this was a dark day for Jane going back for chemotherapy. And my phone call came and she said to me, hi, Dal. And I went, have you not been for treatment? And she said, I did. And today I met an angel. And I actually was like, my God, what is she talking about now? Angels? And I said, Dal, go and have a lie down and ring me back. And she burst out laughing. And she said, no. Today I met an angel. The angel's called Alison Schweitzer. Alison is my breast care nurse. The difference this woman has made to my life when I've walked into the hospital of St. George, that dark day of having chemotherapy, I've walked out, Trace, feeling lighter, with a clearer head. I feel like a mum again. I feel like a wife again, and I can be a good friend to you again. And she said, and I want you to know that I have not told you how I'm really feeling. And I said, why? You can tell me anything. And she said, because if I tell you what I'm really going through, you can't help me. You can't say anything that's going to make it right. You don't know what to do. She said, but I've walked in there today. I've met Alison. I've told her everything that's keeping me awake at night, things I've told nobody. And she has been there holding my hand. She said, and honestly, Tracy, the difference she's made for my life, I want that for every Australian family. She said, I know what we're going to do. I said, what are we doing? She said, I found it. We're going to raise funds for breast care nurses. And within that, meeting Alison was when we had our mission for the McGrath Foundation.
Thank you for sharing that, Tracy. So you mentioned before 367 care nurses now, not just supporting breast cancer patients, but all cancer patients. What would you say to them? Because no doubt they're impacting people's lives like Alison did Jane's.
Well, I've actually just done an induction this morning for 25 of our new McGrath Cancer Care Nurses. And I always get emotional and I always say to them, welcome to the family. Thank you for continuing the work that started the McGrath Foundation in the legacy, under Jane's legacy, keeping her legacy alive. Thank you for the difference. And I say to them, I know it's a hard, thankless job sometime, but I want you to know that we hear you, we see you, we know the difference you make every single day because we hear every single day from the 174,000 families that we've been able to give free care. Because as we say, it's not just a patient who gets that free care, it's the whole family, because the whole family is impacted by a diagnosis of cancer. And many of them will cry and, because they say we've never been treated like this. And, but I want them to understand that they are having a huge impact every single day on a family's life. And we also make sure we support our nurses. We have clinical leads. We're continually helping them with re-educating them because obviously things are constantly moving in the cancer space. We make sure that we support our nurses so they can give that best equity of care to families diagnosed now with a cancer diagnosis.
How do you describe the McGrath Foundation and its team today? No doubt, as you say, that there's those frontline nurses, but a huge support team and admin team and others, no doubt. How do you describe where it's arrived to? And I guess the second part to that is how does that make you feel?
So the induction that I give to all our new nurses, it's like you were listening to it today, Jeremy, because I tell them exactly the story of meeting Jane and everything I've told you today. I give them all that story. But then I also end by saying that the McGrath Foundation team is the reason why you are funded. Because the McGrath Foundation work incredibly hard with our supporters. And obviously it's the supporter funds that allow us to place more nurses across Australia, especially as when we first started, we focused on rural and regional Australia because Jane just could not understand how families or people being diagnosed did not have access to the services that she had. And I tell them that, I hope that they feel confident in their position, because the McGrath Foundation team are incredible. And the reason that we work with incredible corporates, donors, because we work with the federal government, the reason why we work with the community. I travel the length and breadth of Australia. I've just returned from Perth, working with those in the community who maybe have a Pink Up Your Town for the McGrath Foundation. That's our campaign in October. Who might have a Pink Stumps Day for us in February, or hold their own event. I make sure that we support those events, and I attend many events across Australia to tell the story, but to help people understand the reason the McGrath Foundation has 367 McGrath Cancer Care Nurses now in many cancer streams now, and still, we're exactly the same in breast. It's our biggest number of nurses. Nothing's changed there. But the reason we do what we do and we can do what we do is because we have this incredible team at the McGrath Foundation who are tied to the mission. And every time I get the opportunity to join a conference with our nurses, or I talk to them online, or I meet them when I'm away and they come to an event with me, I always say thank you on behalf of Jane for their work making a difference to families' lives, and help them feel proud of the role that they play in a very difficult time in somebody's lives. And it makes me just feel, honestly, I could cry, and I'm known at the foundation for crying all the time. There's many things to cry at, but there's many things to smile at and be proud of. And I'm incredibly proud of the McGrath Foundation team, past, present, future. And I'm very proud of our board, but I'm very proud of our work our nurses do. And because I'm a recipient of that beautiful love and care, friendship, that people come to me all the time and give me a hug and say, just want to thank you for the support that you've given my family, and that's really special. So I want to pass that on to our nurses and just thank them every time I see them.
And just for our listeners, what is the sort of care that you see those nurses extending to those families?
Yeah, so they give clinical, psychosocial and emotional support to not just the patient, but the whole family. But it's more than that. Jane captured it beautifully when she said to me, she's a friend. She's a friend that can help me navigate the health system, because that's a minefield. But when you've got someone like your breast care nurse at the time for Jane, now a McGrath Cancer Care Nurse, basically holding your hand every step of the way, who puts your needs ahead of the hospital or the clinician, who puts the patient first. And we have our own model of care. So our nurses work to our model of care, which we established in 2015, because there was no model of care. Because we've now gone to all cancers, we've now just released our new model of care, which is to cover all different types of cancers. Because, of course, we were only experts in breast. But now I am so blooming proud of our model of care, because, as we say, it sets the standard of giving that care to Australian families who deserve it, and who not everybody chooses it. There are some people who don't want the care of a McGrath Cancer Care Nurse, and that's okay. But for those that do, it's an incredible model of care, and it also is completely free. You don't even need a referral, and I'm just really proud of it.
Would you say to the people out there that have chosen not to, is there a word of encouragement for them to look at that decision again and maybe reconsider?
No, because I don't think it's about us, it's about them. So for us, it's making people know we are a service that is open there for them. It's not something everybody has to take. They might have a great support around them, that with family and friends, and they don't want that. And that's absolutely fine. We're not here to make people, but we are there if people want that service. You can go to the McGrath Foundation website and get information on where our nurses are placed. As I said, we've got 250 breast care nurses. That was when we reached our mission. That's when we made the decision to go to all cancers. And we are now slowly placing cancer nurses in all different cancer streams. I want to say that it will take time to get to every single cancer stream. But I've seen what's happened over the past 20 years. We reached our mission. Not every charity reaches their mission. And then we've decided to go on and take that same expert care and now slowly, because the team will be saying, hold on, Trace. We are fundraising. We are looking to place nurses, obviously constantly, but we can't do that without Australia. And we do need Australia more than ever, because unfortunately, Jeremy, if it had been a couple of years ago and you'd had me on here, I would have told you that the statistic is 57 people every single day in Australia are diagnosed with breast cancer. But I'm here to tell you now, the statistic at the McGrath Foundation that we now lead to is 1 in 2 people will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. So we might have 367, but with those statistics, we need more support than ever to bring that care that every single family deserves. Having that person who's there by your side, who's acting, out of the multidisciplinary team, she sat there with your name in her mouth. She's shaping the care to your needs, not to our needs. And that's why, you will always hear the McGrath Foundation very grateful for the support, but always talking about the support we need, because unfortunately, 1 in 2 means we need more nurses.
It's a really interesting insight, Tracy, because on your website, you talk about how the pink test raised $12 million and kind of helped 8,000 families. But if 1 in 2 Aussies are going to be impacted, we can see that there's a far greater need than even that significant amount raised through that one campaign.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, $12 million. Do you know what I mean? Let's not take away that. $12 million from a game of cricket. I mean, I've been involved with the cricket for 30 years. And never in my life did I think, sat in the ladies' stand with Jane while we were pretending we liked the game of cricket for many years till we got that engagement ring. But we sat there, never in my life did I think I'd even see a member wearing pink. Did I think that touring teams would change their logos on their shirts, their caps pink, and hand it back for us? Never in my life did I think that. But now it's just part of the Sydney test. And I actually had Andrew Strauss, the captain of England, come to me once. And he asked, before he asked this, and he said to me, I want you to know, Tracy, first of all, he said, proud of you as a Brit, and you and Jane as Brits. So I was like, thank you very much. And then he said to me, I want you to know, there's 3 things. He said, you might know this as a cricket wife. He said, but there's 3 things as a cricketer, especially as an England cricketer, what you want to achieve. 1 is playing in a Boxing Day test. 1 is playing at Lord's. And now 1 is playing at a pink test. And I was like, Andrew, can't believe it. He went, honestly, he said, the only thing is we give them their caps and they sign them and give them us back. And he said, but we've got nothing left to show. So they have their family and friends bidding on our auction to get their caps back. But also Andrew did contact me and say to me, look, because he lost his wife, Ruth, and he was wanting to replicate what we do at the pink test in Lord's. He just actually had it turn red for Ruth. And he said to us, could you give us any advice? And I said, no, we won't give you advice. We will share everything with you. We'll give you all the knowledge that we've learned over the years. We are happy to support you in any capacity, as we are anyone who wants support. Even our model of care, we share with anyone who needs it. And it was so beautiful to see that he turned Lord's red for Ruth.
Yeah, it was incredible. What does it say to you about humanity when you see elite sporting teams making such significant changes in order to be able to give back? And, I think I've got the number here, just bear with me a moment, but I think 480 seats got sold at that one cricket game. There's only 80,000 seats in the stadium. Like, what does it say to you about humanity and, I guess, the collective generosity that exists behind a good cause?
Well, there's absolutely nothing like the pink test in any sport. There's nothing in the world. So there's that, and Australia did it. But what it shows me is that, of course, the pink test is about cricket. But it also shows me the fact that people will come together and for the greater good. So bigger than the game, they will come together and stand side by side. We had the Barmy Army and the Aussies the riches stand side by side. I mean, who would have thought that, singing together? And that just unified to me. That's what it's about. Yes, we're here to, play cricket, and that's fantastic. And what a game of sport it is. But in the bigger picture, we're coming together to support families going through an incredibly tough time. And I always say, the McGrath Foundation shares patient stories, nurse stories. I share Jane's story. Glenn gives families hope. But at the end of the day, everyone has got their own Jane, has got their own John, or they are, someone who's going through the same thing as Jane. And now, because we've got 367 nurses and supported over 174,000 families, more people have had access to one of our nurses. More people understand the difference our nurses make. So we come together for the greater good for those who are going through cancer, who might go through cancer, and those who've been through it and want to give back. And it's just beautiful. It's never falls short on my shoulders when I walk through the SCG gates and I see that sea of pink, especially on Jane McGrath Day. And I always have a time on my own and just have a little cry and just think, God bless every single person who buys one of the virtual pink seats, who holds an event for us, who in whatever capacity you support us. Thank you. And it's because of you that we can make a difference to families' lives. And I think that's the beauty of what we do at the Pink Test and at the McGrath Foundation.
Tracy, looping back to those first and early days, I think the McGrath Foundation started at one of your kitchen tables.
Yeah.
2 questions. What would Jane say today, do you think, if she was sitting there then seeing what could have been possible?
Well, I know what she'd say, because constantly, even before she passed, I asked her, what does she want me to do? I made promises that till the day I see her again, I'd continue what we started. But I know that she would be so incredibly proud of Australia, because it's because of Australia in every capacity that we exist. Because it's not our money. It's not mine, Glenn, Jane's money. It's Australia's money in whatever capacity that is. She would just be so grateful. She would laugh at the funny ways that people have turned things pink for us. But to walk through the SCG, I say the SCG because obviously it's on a scale, but, to see people wearing pink and, some people have changed outfits. One woman I always think of, she had pink credit cards and she got loads of blank credit cards and made a dress out of it. Just incredible ways and fun and exciting ways. And to see people not just fundraising for us, but having fun. She used to say, let's put the fun in fundraising, and to see that, how Australians do it really well. And I've seen it on the field and off the field in times of toughness, even, farmers, and seeing what they go through. Is the hardest working people I see are farmers. And I've met many farmers too, and we've had farmers who've had diagnoses of cancer and breast cancer. I'm thinking of a lady in Outback, WA, and she says, because we have one of our nurses with the Royal Flying Doctors, Tracy Bevan, no family member, but great name. And she said she had a diagnosis of Annie, she was called, and she was going through breast cancer. And she said when she saw the Royal Flying Doctors come, she said, and her sons were working on the fields, and she felt terrible because they came back because of a diagnosis. And she said, and she had her family back working hard every single day on the land. And she said, but, they all would wave knowing that Joe was coming in to give me the support. She said, and it wasn't just about giving me treatment, Trace. She was like my girlfriend to gossip with, and tell me what's been going on since we last caught up over a cup of tea, a bake a cake. And I loved hearing that. I loved that we were getting to those in the outback who are working hard to provide for Australia, and how proud Jane would be, how proud she would be, and how grateful she would be. And for her, she was terrified that James and Holly would forget who she was. They were 6 and 8 when she passed. And now to think that the whole of Australia knows who she is, and no one's going to let, especially as their godmother, no one's going to let, Australia's never going to let James and Holly forget who Jane is. It's beautiful.
I don't think any of us will ever forget who Jane and Tracy as a duo. So my second part to that question Tracy, is when you were sitting back at that kitchen table and to think of where you sit now in your leadership role in this great charity, what are you most proud of?
I'm incredibly proud of the charity itself because we are very cognizant of the money that we receive, making sure that we are doing the very best we can do to provide a service to families. We are very open and transparent the way we are. We are very, like I say, cognizant of that money has been given to us. And we make sure that we're doing our due diligence. We mapped the whole of Australia. We've just done that now. We've gone to all cancers. We are mapping the whole of Australia to find out where the need is, what type of cancer nurse needs to be placed. So I'm really proud we're really good at the McGrath Foundation. The team is incredible. We've got an incredible chairman in John Condy and the board. I sit there thinking, how the hell am I sat here with these incredible people? I'm going to pull Glenn in on that one as well. But we are so grateful for the free time that they give leading our executive team. I'm proud of, and we've just, Holly Masters, who was our CEO for 8 years, just retired in January. What an incredible woman and leader she is. When I first met her and she said, what do you want? And I told her I want the foundation to remain incredible culture, values. I want the team to be supported. I want the nurses to be supported. Obviously, I want to make sure that we are placing as many growth so we can place as many nurses as quickly as possible. And that woman led an incredible team who reached our mission. So I sit here and I think back and I think, wow, I am so proud of the McGrath Foundation. And I hope that Australia is also proud of the McGrath Foundation because we're not a huge charity, but we are making a huge difference.
Absolutely. And I've only got a couple of other questions because we are a kind of business podcast for farmers. So it would be remiss of me to just sort of put a bit of a business spin on this. The charity has grown really quickly and charities are businesses in and of themselves. What's it taken to handle the sort of growth that has been achieved? And what are just 2 or 3 insights? You mentioned the great leadership team and the board and the executive and having a really compelling CEO who obviously aligned to your vision and your goals. What are some of the other kind of key insights for how you've grown the business and the team as quickly as you have?
Well, I think when Holly came on, there was a time of, obviously we did say we wanted to look at strategies of how we get growth, but there was that point when we had to stop. And as Holly said, we had to just stop and look at everything. Yes, we need to grow, but we need to do it in a strategic way that we're not growing too fast. We need to grow in a way that we can still have control, which is, we're going through great growth now. We've gone to all cancers and, building strategies, of course, building budget strategies, how to do that. And then obviously building a team now, building that team for the future.
So many of our listeners have farms, Tracy, that are completely dependent on them. Metaphorically speaking, they're a bit like you and Jane at the kitchen table. And I'd just encourage those of you that might be a little bit under-resourced and you might not have invested in team or focused on culture and building out your team enough so that your business can grow, perhaps just to listen to Tracy's last few minutes again, because there's some incredible insights in that about the importance of setting down a unique culture and going about building out a team that can lead from where they are and get things done for you. It's a big reason why we exist, Tracy, is to help farming families create those teams and the culture and the infrastructure and the strategy and the frameworks that can support a successful farm business team. So really appreciate your comments. Tracy, you made a promise that sounds like a lifelong promise to your best friend. I just want to acknowledge just the conviction and the commitment and the love and caring and the determination that you have shown I can only imagine, over that time, and that no doubt you'll continue to show in your leadership of what is a really important project for Australia. Thank you so much for your time. And there you have it, ladies and gents, an incredible insight into how the McGrath Foundation came to be, the amazing woman that Jane McGrath was, and the incredible leader that Tracy Bevan now is. It's amazing to think about the impact that the McGrath Foundation and that team of nurses and support people have had on, as Tracy says, over 174 families across Australia. And it's amazing to think about the impact that the McGrath Foundation has had and will continue to have across our country. Thank you, Tracy, so much for your openness, for your sharing, and to all of you listening, I hope you found that insightful. And please make sure that you reach out to the McGrath Foundation if there's anyone in your family and in your community that you think they can help. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thank you, Tracy, and bye for now. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Profitable Farmer podcast by Farm Owners Academy. If you're new to this show, be sure to follow us. If you've been a long-time listener, let your friends know about us or come continue the conversation in the Profitable Farmer Facebook group. All the best as you grow your business and create your freedom farm. Until next time, keep being incredible.